The silence is never truly silent in places where death has walked the halls. In the UK's most haunted hospitals, the boundary between life and death isn't as clear as you might think. These halls once witnessed countless final breaths, desperate prayers, and unimaginable suffering. Across Britain, medical facilities of all kinds harbor more than just memories. When pain, fear, and death saturate a place for decades, something stays behind. Something that doesn't belong to the world of the living. Welcome to the UK's most haunted hospitals. Newsham Park Hospital, Liverpool. Welcome to Newsham Park Hospital in Liverpool, a Grade 2 listed building that stands as one of Britain's most terrifyingly haunted former medical institutions. What began as an act of compassion has become a beacon for the paranormal, where the dead refuse to rest. In 1868, a group of Liverpool ship owners came together with noble intentions. They wanted to help the widows and families of deceased Merseyside seamen, men who had lost their lives to the unforgiving sea. What emerged from their philanthropy was Newsham Park Hospital, originally established as a seamen's orphanage. The building served multiple purposes throughout its operational years. Children who had lost their fathers to maritime disasters found refuge here, while the facility also functioned as a hospital treating the sick and dying. For decades, these walls absorbed the grief of orphaned children, the pain of the ill, and the final moments of countless souls. But it was during its later years as a psychiatric hospital that Newsham Park truly earned its dark reputation. The facility housed patients with severe mental health conditions, many of whom lived and died within these walls, never knowing freedom again. The hospital finally closed its doors in the 1990s, leaving behind empty wards, abandoned medical equipment, and something far more sinister: the spirits of those who never left. Even while the hospital was still operational, staff members reported disturbing encounters. Nurses working night shifts spoke of unexplained apparitions wandering the corridors. But perhaps the most chilling incident occurred when a female nurse reported seeing a mysterious figure in one of the wards. Shortly after this sighting, she was found dead on the main corridor under circumstances that were never fully explained. This tragic death seemed to open a doorway that has never been closed. Since the hospital's abandonment, the paranormal activity has intensified dramatically. Security guards patrolling the empty building have reported hearing distant voices echoing through the halls, conversations between people who shouldn't be there. These whispered exchanges seem to come from the old psychiatric wings, where patients once spent their final days. Workmen, attempting to maintain the deteriorating structure, have experienced terrifying encounters. Tools have been moved from where they were left, sometimes found in completely different areas of the building. Hammering sounds echo through empty rooms where no one is working. Several contractors have refused to return after experiencing these unexplained phenomena. The most frequently reported apparition is that of a nurse, believed to be the same woman who died under mysterious circumstances. Witnesses describe seeing her in the old psychiatric wings, still making her rounds decades after her death. She appears as a shadowy figure in a vintage nursing uniform, checking on patients in beds that no longer exist. The children's wing holds its own tragic energies. Paranormal investigators have reported hearing the sound of children crying and playing in areas that house the orphans. Toys left by investigators have been found moved or arranged in patterns that suggest intelligent interaction. From the children's wing to the morgue, the refrigeration units that once held the deceased now stand empty with their doors hanging open, revealing the body drawers inside. Security cameras have allegedly captured unexplained shadows moving through this area, and several witnesses have reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread when entering this section of the building. The basement has also had frequent reports of a headless man in white, and during investigations, a voice came through saying, "I lost my head." Then the word "saw," which investigators thought could have been accidentally sawn off during an autopsy or an accident. This suggests a spirit that may have been decapitated, either through medical procedures or an accident. There has also been demonic rituals carried out here in the chapel and other areas, with investigators finding a makeshift Ouija board on one of the original tables. This indicates the building has been used for occult practices that may have attracted malevolent entities. Yet another disturbing incident involved the original owner finding bones and teeth in the building, which suggests there may be undiscovered human remains still hidden within the structure. Today, Newsham Park Hospital stands as a monument to the thin veil between life and death. The building remains largely abandoned, with only the occasional security patrol and brave paranormal investigator venturing inside. Those who do enter often leave with stories that haunt them for years. The hospital has become a pilgrimage site for ghost hunters, but it's not a place for the faint of heart. The concentration of tragic deaths, suffering, and emotional trauma has created what many believe to be a perfect storm for paranormal activity. The Royal London Hospital, Whitechapel. The Royal London Hospital stands as one of Britain's most historically significant medical institutions, with a legacy stretching back nearly 3 centuries. Founded in September 1740 as the London Infirmary, it was originally the first charitable infirmary on the east side of London, intended to offer relief to merchant sailors and labourers. The name changed to the London Hospital in 1748, and in 1990 to the Royal London Hospital. The hospital has been an important landmark on the south side of Whitechapel Road since it transferred to this site in 1757, where it became deeply embedded in the fabric of London's East End. For over 2 centuries, this institution served some of London's poorest and most vulnerable populations, bearing witness to countless human tragedies, medical breakthroughs, and societal upheavals. The hospital's most infamous chapter began in 1888, during the height of the Jack the Ripper murders that terrorized Whitechapel. The Royal London Hospital became intrinsically linked to these gruesome crimes when it received and examined evidence from the Ripper's victims. Most notably, the hospital's medical staff were called upon to analyze human remains sent to local officials. Half a human kidney was first sent anonymously to George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee on the 16th of October, 1888. This was allegedly the kidney that had been extracted by the Ripper from Catherine Eddowes. Lusk was encouraged to have it examined by a medical expert at the hospital. During this dark period, the hospital's morgue and examination rooms saw the mutilated remains of the Ripper's victims, with doctors and nurses working under the shadow of London's most notorious serial killer. The atmosphere of fear and dread that permeated Whitechapel during this time seemed to seep into the very walls of the hospital itself. The hospital also gained fame for housing Joseph Merrick, known as the Elephant Man, who lived in a specially adapted room from 1886 until his death in 1890. Merrick's tragic story added another layer of human suffering to the hospital's already heavy atmosphere. Throughout the Victorian era and into the 20th century, the Royal London Hospital witnessed thousands of deaths, medical experiments, surgical procedures, and human suffering. Its wards saw victims of industrial accidents, disease outbreaks, wartime casualties, and the everyday tragedies of life in London's impoverished East End. The institution was supported largely by voluntary contributions and donations from its foundation until the establishment of the National Health Service in 1948. The Royal London Hospital's long history of death, suffering, and medical procedures has created an atmosphere ripe for paranormal activity. The combination of emotional trauma, violent deaths, and the lingering energy of countless patients who died within its walls has made it one of London's most haunted medical facilities. Staff at the hospital and urban explorers have reported hearing the distant sound of train wheels grinding against tracks in the basement levels of the old hospital building, despite no active railway running beneath the structure. These phantom train sounds are accompanied by the metallic clanking of what witnesses describe as body cages, the metal containers supposedly used to transport corpses on the dead body train. While there is no evidence of a dead body train directly connected to the Royal London Hospital, it's possible that the hospital itself may have used the London Necropolis Railway for transporting bodies, as it was common at the time. Most disturbing are reports of spectral figures dressed in Victorian-era railway uniforms seen in the hospital's basement levels, apparently still conducting their grim duties. These phantom railway workers appear to be loading invisible cargo onto invisible trains, going through the motions of their morbid profession with mechanical precision. Staff members working night shifts in the old hospital sections report encounters with patients who simply should not exist. These are not the typical ghostly apparitions, but rather interactions with seemingly solid flesh and blood patients who engage in full conversations before inexplicably vanishing. Nurses describe being approached by patients asking for help, appearing to be suffering from Victorian-era diseases that were eradicated decades ago. These phantom patients speak in archaic dialects, request treatments that haven't been used in over a century, and exhibit symptoms of conditions like consumption, cholera, and plague. When staff members turn to retrieve medical supplies or call for assistance, the patients simply disappear, leaving behind only the lingering scent of carbolic acid and old bandages. In the areas that once housed the hospital's oldest surgical theaters, witnesses report experiencing what can only be described as temporal overlays, moments where past and present collide in terrifying ways. Security guards and maintenance workers describe walking into rooms and suddenly hearing the sounds of Victorian-era surgery, the scraping of bone saws, the hiss of early anesthetic gases, and the screams of patients undergoing procedures without proper pain relief. More disturbingly, some witnesses report seeing these surgical procedures actually taking place, as if they're watching through a window into the past. They describe Victorian surgeons in blood-stained aprons working frantically on patients strapped to crude wooden tables, surrounded by medical students taking notes. The surgeons appear to be aware of the modern observers, occasionally looking up from their gory work to make direct eye contact with witnesses before the entire scene fades away. Other disturbing reports come from areas that house the hospital's pathology collection, preserved organs, specimens, and medical curiosities used for teaching purposes. Even after these collections were moved or disposed of, the rooms retain an atmosphere of scientific horror. Witnesses describe seeing phantom specimen jars lining shelves, filled with floating organs and body parts that seem to move and pulse with impossible life. The preserved remains of medical anomalies, two-headed infants, conjoined twins, and grotesque tumors appear to watch visitors with eyes that should not be able to see. Joseph Merrick's tragic life and death at the hospital has left its own paranormal signature. In the area where his specially adapted room once stood, visitors and staff have reported hearing soft, labored breathing when no living person is present. The sound matches historical descriptions of Merrick's breathing difficulties caused by his severe deformities. Shadows that don't match any visible person or object have been seen moving past windows in the upper floors, hunched and misshapen in a way that suggests Merrick's distinctive silhouette. These shadow figures appear most frequently during the early morning hours, around the time when Merrick would have been found deceased in his room. The hospital's connection to the Jack the Ripper murders has left an indelible psychic imprint on the building. Staff members and visitors have reported disturbing phenomena in areas that once housed the morgue and examination rooms where the Ripper's victims were brought for analysis. Cold spots plague these areas, with temperatures dropping dramatically without explanation. The scent of Victorian-era medical chemicals, carbolic acid and formaldehyde, has been detected in rooms that no longer serve medical purposes. These phantom odors often appear suddenly and dissipate just as quickly, leaving witnesses questioning their senses. Disembodied voices speaking in Cockney accents have been heard in the basement areas, possibly the voices of the Ripper's victims whose remains were examined here. These voices often sound distressed or pleading, speaking words that witnesses can never quite make out clearly. The voices seem to come from the walls themselves, creating an atmosphere of profound unease. The combination of the hospital's connection to Jack the Ripper, the mysterious dead body train, and centuries of medical horror has created layers of paranormal activity that span different historical periods. The Royal London Hospital stands as a testament to how places touched by intense human suffering can become repositories for multiple forms of supernatural energy, creating a paranormal environment where past tragedies continue to play out. Denby Asylum, Wales. Built between 1844 and 1848, Denby Asylum was Wales's first purpose-built psychiatric hospital. Designed by architect Thomas Fulljames, this imposing Victorian structure was originally created to house Welsh-speaking patients with mental illnesses, a progressive concept for its time, as previous care had been almost non-existent. The asylum initially opened with capacity for just 200 patients, but demand quickly overwhelmed the facility. By 1899, overcrowding forced a major expansion, and by the 1950s, the hospital housed over 1,500 patients, alongside nearly 1,000 staff members. What happened within these walls over the next century would leave an indelible mark on the building itself. Like many Victorian-era mental institutions, Denby Asylum employed treatments that we now consider barbaric. Patients underwent lobotomies, electroconvulsive therapy, and other controversial procedures. The most vulnerable members of society, the poor, the mentally ill, the forgotten, lived and died within these walls, often far from their families. The asylum operated for 147 years before finally closing its doors in 1995. But according to countless witnesses, not everyone left. Several reports from investigators indicate that a lot of the entities at Denby Asylum can be violent and are not afraid to make their presence known. People have reported being scratched, pushed, and even slapped across their faces. In some cases, leaving bruising and marks. The asylum's clock tower has become a focal point for supernatural activity. Visitors report seeing figures moving within the tower, despite the structure being inaccessible due to decay. Multiple witnesses also claim to have heard the long, silent clock chiming. However, the clock's mechanism has long been removed. A caretaker is alleged to haunt the area, with multiple witnesses reporting encounters with a figure in work clothes who appears to be maintaining the building despite its abandoned state. This entity reportedly becomes aggressive when approached, leading to several investigators fleeing the premises. Investigators have also reported becoming lost in a maze of corridors, rooms, halls, and stairways, spending over an hour trying to find their way back out. What's particularly unsettling is that experienced urban explorers familiar with the building's layout report that corridors seem to change, leading them into areas that shouldn't exist according to the original blueprints. Another full-body apparition that has reportedly been seen is that of a woman in a hospital gown, seen wandering down the hallways or standing at broken windows. Witnesses say she has a vacant, sorrowful stare and will occasionally turn to look directly at onlookers before fading away. Objects have also been said to move on their own, particularly wheelchairs, which some claim have rolled across rooms without anyone touching them. In one chilling account, an urban explorer left a crucifix in a former patient room, only to return minutes later to find it hanging upside down. Particularly disturbing are accounts of crawling entities, humanoid shadows moving low to the ground, with jerky, unnatural movements. One investigator described watching such a figure slowly emerge from a former treatment room, only to vanish into the darkness moments later. Deep, guttural growls emanating from pitch-black hallways, maniacal screams being heard, along with eerie laughter and doors slamming of their own accord, are also among the many reports from visitors and investigators. Today, Denby Asylum stands as a crumbling monument to both Victorian-era medicine and the possibility that some spirits refuse to rest. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, the combination of genuine historical tragedy and eyewitness testimony makes this one of the UK's most compelling haunted locations. The asylum serves as a reminder that some places hold on to their past, and sometimes that past refuses to let go. Helingley Hospital, Sussex. Construction of Helingley Hospital began in 1898, sprawling across 400 acres of dense Sussex woodland. This wasn't just any ordinary asylum. It was designed as a self-sufficient community, complete with its own farm, laundry, and workshops where patients would work as part of their treatment. The hospital officially opened its doors in 1903, initially housing around 2,000 patients suffering from various mental health conditions. Like many asylums of its era, Helingley employed the usual treatments that we now recognize as barbaric, including lobotomies, electroshock therapy, and prolonged isolation. What made Helingley particularly notorious was its sheer scale and the conditions patients endured. The massive Victorian complex consisted of multiple interconnected buildings, creating a maze-like environment where patients could easily become lost or forgotten. Many who entered these halls would never leave, spending decades isolated from the outside world. The hospital continued operating well into the late 20th century, but by the 1980s and 90s, changes in mental health care meant that large institutions like Helingley were no longer considered appropriate. The hospital finally closed its doors in 1994, but the suffering that occurred within its walls for nearly a century had already left an indelible mark. After closure, the building stood abandoned for years, slowly decaying in the Sussex countryside. It was during this period of abandonment that Helingley's reputation as one of Britain's most haunted locations truly began to take hold. Numerous visitors have reported a tall, dark figure standing at the far end of corridors. He doesn't move, he doesn't speak. But what sets him apart is his unnaturally wide grin. Witnesses claim they first hear a faint chuckle, then see him standing, motionless. Each time they look away and back again, he's closer, but he never moves, not visibly. In the ruins of the women's wing, several explorers described seeing the figure of a woman clutching her head and screaming, but with no sound. Her mouth wide open in frozen agony. Those who saw her reported a sudden plunge in temperature, overwhelming sadness, and in some cases uncontrollable sobbing. Another disturbing report is known as the bed that breathes. In one decaying patient room sits a rusted, broken bed. Explorers have described hearing steady creaking, as though someone were lying in it, breathing. The mattress, they say, slowly rises and falls, as if an unseen patient remains trapped there, even in death. Some visitors describe not just a feeling of being watched, but seeing dozens of small eyes reflecting in shattered glass and puddles. These aren't animals. They're often motionless, blinking slowly, staring from just beyond the light. In the laundry room, long rusted chains that once supported laundry baskets still hang. They've been seen swaying violently in sealed rooms with no drafts. One paranormal team captured the moment chains began swinging in opposite directions after someone shouted provocatively into the darkness. The hospital at one time did house children and young patients. Explorers reported hearing soft humming like a lullaby, followed by quiet scratching sounds. In some cases, small handprints appeared in the dust on the walls and floor. The tune, they say, becomes distorted the longer you listen. Investigators have experienced what they call time loops. One described stepping into a corridor and suddenly hearing hospital sounds, footsteps, trolleys, voices. He turned around. His team was gone. A moment later, they were back, but they'd never moved. He'd only been gone a second. After a fire damaged parts of the abandoned hospital, a new apparition was reported. Witnesses saw a charred black figure with glowing orange eyes walking through the soot-covered halls. They described the overwhelming smell of burning flesh and a paralyzing sense of terror. Most who encounter it refuse to return. What lingers in Helingley isn't just a memory, it's a presence, one that watches, that waits, and that never truly left. Thank you for joining me. If you liked the content, why not like and subscribe and leave a comment down below. See you next time.